While the poor masses of Iran suffered, their American-backed leader, the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, thrived with support from the Western nations. Infuriated with the white revolution that the Shah pushed, anti-Western protests began. However, the student protests were nothing until 1979, when a religious leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, led thousands of Iranian students in the takeover of the United States Embassy in Tehran. 52 Americans were taken hostage for 444 days. The U.S. and our own president, Jimmy Carter, underestimated the Iran hostage crisis. However, it became a significant turning point in history because it affected the re-election of Carter and altered U.S.-Iran relations, which to this day have not been healed. For most Americans, the story of U.S.-Iran relations begins in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution and overthrow of the embassy. However, to understand what ignited the fire, we must go back in time to 1953 when the U.S. orchestrated a CIA coup to overthrow Iran's democracy and put in power the Shah, a pro-U.S. dictator. However hugely popular he was in the U.S., the Shah was not popular in Iran. He was opulent and pompous and installed fear in his people through a secret military force, the Savak. While the Shah thrived, the poor masses of Iran suffered, creating civil unrest. During the Shah's reign, a prominent religious leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, rose up in religious groups as anti-American. Khomeini was imprisoned and then sent into exile by the Shah. However, that did not stop him from continuing his anti-Shah, anti-US campaign from abroad. The Shah then banned demonstrations, creating a general strike and shutting down the economy. The Shah then fled from Iran to the U.S. to receive medical treatment and a safe haven. During this period, the Shah was forced to allow Ayatollah Khomeini to return. From there, Khomeini led thousands of outraged people, and on November 4, 1979, overthrew the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. An excerpt from one of the hostages' diary reads, "It was raining moderately at the time. We were taken back to the compound, being pushed and hurried along the way and forced to put our hands above our heads, and then marched to the embassy residence. After arriving at the residence, I had my hands tied behind my back so tightly with nylon cord that circulation was cut off." The Iranian students would not release the hostages until their needs were met. The students' demands were, return the Shah to Iran for a trial, return his wealth to the Iranian people, the promise of no more U.S. interference of Iranian affairs, and an admission of guilt from the U.S. for its past actions. As hard as the U.S. and then-President Jimmy Carter tried, the students would not back down from their demands. President Carter tried to organize a rescue mission that failed, and embargoed oil trade with Iran.
Our position must be clear. I am ordering that we discontinue purchasing of any oil from Iran for delivery to this country.
Ayatollah Khomeini was then put into power later in 1979. Within a year, Iraq invaded Iran unprovoked. During the 8-year war, 500,000 Iranians were killed. The Shah, still in the U.S., also passed away. Both the war and the Shah's death made Iran more open to negotiations regarding the hostages. Finally, on January 20th, 1981, the 52 American hostages were released after 444 days of captivity in Iran.
Just looking at them, they appear to have, momentarily at least, lost complete touch with reality. I'm quite sure they cannot conceive that they are free now.
A short-term consequence of the hostage crisis was the election of Ronald Reagan. Because of Jimmy Carter's inability to free the hostages during his tenure, his popularity declined and his campaign was weakened. After the crisis, Ayatollah Khomeini was replaced with Ayatollah Khamenei, and then with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who is still in power today. Under the different rulers, Iran became an oppressive theocracy, and Ahmadinejad became a divisive figure in world affairs, cheering on the development of Iran's nuclear program, despite orders from the UN Security Council to halt it. With anti-American sentiment in Iran and nuclear weapon development, both spurred by the hostage crisis, foreign relations between Iran and the U.S. were negatively affected for the long term. To this day, Iran is seen as a hostile nation. Moderated communication between the two countries is needed. In addition, an oil embargo is still in place, and economic relations are limited. The Iran hostage crisis changed both nations' outlooks on foreign affairs forever. The crisis contributed to hatred between the U.S. and the Middle East and began other events such as the destruction of the World Trade Center in 2001. Both the American and Iranian governments continue to have little diplomatic relations with each other. However, recently things have been moving in the right direction. In an interview on NPR in 2008, former National Security Advisor to President Carter Zbigniew Brzezinski said,
"There is, unfortunately, a history of painful relations between the two countries. But having said that, I think there's also the potential of some shared interests."
There is also hope that U.S.-Iran relations will improve with President Barack Obama in office. At a conference in Washington, D.C. in March of 2012, Obama said, "Diplomacy backed by pressure could be the key to better relations with the Middle East." Our current president is willing to have open discussions with Iran, however he continues to support the sanctions already put in place. He added, "Iran's leader should understand that I do not have a policy of containment. I have a policy to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon." This does not take away from the fact that U.S.-Iran relations have still not been completely healed after the hostage crisis of 1979. Hillary Clinton summarizes the U.S. and Iran's current positions perfectly. "We would very much like to see Iran take a position as a responsible leader that does not intimidate or scare its neighbors and others. But the choice is really up to Iran, and we're going to keep working to try to come out with the right decision."